welcome to Your Voice, Your Future. I'm your moderator, Armstrong Williams. She's a native of Baltimore City, educated here, rose to president of the city council, and eventually mayor. And during her leadership, Baltimore experienced its lowest in homicides within the last 15 to 20 years. She's joined us today in a one-on-one sit-down. Sheila, Dixon, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I've followed your career as someone in broadcasting, your incredible story, your incredible journey, and also as mayor. And obviously, it seems as though all elected officials these days are flawed and have some kind of issue with prosecution, and with that issue, whether it's Trump or Hunter Biden, it just seems like that's part of the narrative when we deal with politicians today. But of course, you've had your challenges. I don't need to go through those. But I think the important question as we start this one-on-one 1 hour sit down is talk about the Sheila Dixon and your rise to power and the eventual fall, what you've learned, what you've become, and the wisdom that you've gained from this journey.
So, loving this city and moving from city council to city council president to mayor, and being able to really see the city transform and move forward. The lessons that I really learned is that, one, I learned that I needed to stay grounded in who I was and not based on how people saw me, grounded in being truthful to myself and to the people that I serve. I learned that, you know, some of the mistakes that I've made, that doesn't define me and who I am, but what it did was made me stronger in my belief in what I know that this city can become and is, as well as having the confidence to not allow that situation to hold me back from living my life, because I could have gone and dug a hole and disappeared. But I knew that, you know, I needed to forgive myself and for God to forgive me, and for me to ask the people to forgive me for some bad choices and decisions I made. And that I also know that I had so much to contribute to this city, and that's why those are some of the lessons that I've learned.
You know, as a former mayor, knowing what's possible for this city that you love, do you believe there's a need for change?
I love this city. I am disappointed in the direction that the city has been going in over the last 7 years or so. And I believe that we do have to change. And when we change, we have to change in a way that is going to be transformational, where it's going to be consistent, where it's going to bring about stability, where this change is not going to be temporary, but it's going to be a permanent change, so that our young people and the generations coming after us will see that Baltimore is a great city. You know, I look at everything as a glass being half full, and I'm an optimistic person. And so I definitely believe that we have to make some changes.
What is it about the city that troubles you the most?
What troubles me the most about Baltimore, growing up here, being a product of Baltimore City Public Schools, knowing that people can say, yes, things have changed, but having that foundation and seeing it be deteriorated over the years, and not pointing the fingers or blaming one person or one structure over another, but that we can have better schools. Our kids need to be learning, and we should not be in the situation we are right now in Baltimore City Public Schools. As it relates to our neighborhoods and our communities, we've lost a large number of population. I remember we had close to 1 million people when I grew up in this city. It felt safe. You could move around. It doesn't feel as safe. I mean, you know, I've never been a person that looked behind my back when I'm getting out the car or when I'm doing something. And now I'm more conscious, and maybe I should be. But we have a lot of vacant properties in this city. Certain communities need to be cleaned up. I mean, there are a whole host of issues that we need to address in this city because we have a really nice, when people come here to Baltimore, they're surprised at Baltimore when you look at some of the neighborhoods. But then they're also disappointed when you drive around and you see some of the incidents that you hear on the news or you see firsthand.
Tonight, we're going to talk about, with the former mayor, education, crime, the quality of life, leadership, government, and taxes, and whether or not the former mayor that feels that there's something that she can do to change this disappointing trajectory that she just spoke about, that her beloved city of Baltimore finds itself on. This week, Ms. Dixon, Wallet Hub ranked Baltimore City schools dead last in the entire country out of 150 cities, dead last. That's not just a figure. Those are thousands of young children being failed by the city school system every day. Even the national NAACP and the local NAACP said the city schools are intolerable, dreadful. Even civil rights attorney Ben Crump joined the lawsuit against the school system. Members of the city school board have never sat down with Project Baltimore for an interview, despite 6 years of investigations, finding scandals like grade fixing, ghost students, and illiterate graduates. Does the entire school board and the superintendent need to be replaced? What should be done?
So, first of all, we are committed, Baltimore City residents, taxpayers are now committed to contributing even more money to our Baltimore City public schools. There is a whole host of things that need to happen. We need to tear down the entire system and start over. For basic fundamental things need to happen. You know, we could say COVID was an issue over the last 2 years, but I think it goes beyond COVID and kids not being in the classroom. We have to look at the families. We have to look at what's happening and why we aren't prioritizing within the family education being the first and foremost importance for our children. There are new school board members. We have several members are elected, just got elected last year. I'm not clear about what the school board understands as their role and responsibility because they aren't vocal. We can't say that the school system doesn't have the money that it needs. I just believe that you need the kind of leadership in the city that's going to roll up their sleeves, despite the fact that the school system is a separate entity from Baltimore City government. I never, ever subscribed to that. If you're contributing 1 penny, you have a say on what goes on in that school. But we need to change the structure of what's going on in our school. If we know that COVID impacted young people, then coming out of COVID this last year, our kids should have had extended school day so that they could make up classes, some of them who need to make up classes. I subscribe to a community school concept where you look at the needs of that community based on what's going on in that school, and you pattern that school. You partner with institutions and other agencies that can provide support to that family, that child, so that they can be successful. Because every child is born basically the same way. And to me, it's not about the environment, it's about how we nurture them. And I don't feel like that's happening. I'm very frustrated. You know, I'm a product of Baltimore City Public School. I went to Northwestern High School, which was one of the best high schools in the state of Maryland. It's one of the schools that closed. We had a proposal that we presented about 5 years ago to create an international high school that would have attracted young people from all over the state of Maryland, not just international business, international trade, foreign policy, et cetera. Of course, it was shot down, and now they're using Northwestern as a transition school where schools that are being renovated or that are being built are now housed there. But it's a lot. I mean, we could probably take this whole hour to talk about what has to happen in our schools and the need for the right leadership in our school system right now. I know people are committed, but I know that teachers need additional support. It's unheard of that a young person can pass with a bare 50%. I spoke with a teacher yesterday, and she has to pass a child in her class even if they have 50%. I thought 50% was failing, and pass on to the next grade. We've got to stop that and work with kids where they are.
What would you do with Santa Lisa? What would you do with the superintendent if that was a decision you had to make?
If it was a decision that I had to make, I think she's been there, what, 5, 6 years now? I would go in, have a conversation with the CEO, because she was there before as an education coordinator under Andre Alonso. So it's just like when you're in a certain position and you have the opportunity to be the superintendent or the CEO, Baltimore City is a CEO, you already have an idea of the changes you want to make. You know, it's like me being a city council president and then becoming mayor. I knew exactly what changes I wanted to make. But it just feels like, you know, business as usual. I would sit down with her. I would probably ask her, I think that it's time for us to look for someone else, unless she could make some drastic changes.
And the superintendent?
Well, keep in mind, we don't have a superintendent. We have, the CEO is the equivalent of a superintendent.
Yeah. So, you know, while you were mayor, the homicide count was under 200 a year. I mean, think about that. It was under 200 a year. We've now had 8 consecutive years of more than 300 homicides. What they call Part 1 crimes, robberies, carjackings, rapes, auto thefts are up 20% compared to last year alone. Is this problem fixable? And what policing strategies would you bring back from your previous terms if you were, let's say, if you decided to run for mayor again?
So I wouldn't look at the past and what I would institute, except I would, first of all, we need to do an aggressive recruitment of officers because of not having enough police officers. Secondly, we need to, before officers retire, we need to sit down with them and ask them, why are they retiring? What will it take for them to stay? Because you need experience. You need experienced officers. Third, of course, I would definitely have our officers and work with all the other public safety entities to get individuals out of their cars, into the neighborhoods, get to know the businesses and the residents, walk the beat, not for 15 minutes, but literally be out there if it means all day. Now, it's a little impossible in some cases because of having a shortage and officers getting called over and over. And that's where you need to partner. You need to partner with the sheriff's department. You need to partner with the school police within those boundaries of where those schools are located and get them out there in those communities. You have to partner with the MTA. You know, I'll give you an example. I was driving down North Avenue the other day, and I know the quality of life crime for loitering and other crimes are going to be instituted where they're going to get citations. Well, as I drove past North Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue, there was a whole host of people sitting on the bench. I know half of those people were not waiting for the bus. And when I looked at the MTA police, he was in his car on his phone. Now, instead of being in the car on your phone, why not be out there talking to those individuals about this new citation law that is getting ready to be instituted, to say, hey, look, we're about to institute this citation law. I need y'all to keep moving, not hang on this corner. Let the people who need to catch the bus in the subway catch the bus and allow them to feel comfortable and safe. I mean, you've got to get out there and talk to people, you know, and right now, our police department. So those are some of the things that I would bring back as well as reinstitute.
I'm Officer Williams. Sheila Dixon is our guest. Your voice, your future. We'll be back. Everything starts with leadership. It sets the moral example. It sets the stage for the entire city, whether it's crime, it's education, whether it's the infrastructure. Do you see the leadership that is current, a leadership in their rear that can lead Baltimore to where it needs to go, to return to that city that you so beloved and where you once were the mayor of this city?
What I see right now is the leadership being challenged with not necessarily understanding how to juggle and deal with multiple things at one time. You know, that takes experience. It also takes the knowledge and understanding how city government works. And I think right now we're lacking that. We're lacking the kind of the vision that's really needed. We're also lacking the kind of expertise. You know, a mayor can't do it alone. And you have to be able to attract talented people. And I'm not saying the current mayor doesn't have talented people, because he does. But I've never experienced where we've had so many departments, major departments, where we don't have department heads. DPW, Monzi, who's the young lady who's getting ready to leave. I mean, I can go down a list. The fire department, we have an acting person. I mean, that's a lot of major agencies that you need to have stability, you need to have good talent, and you need to have that kind of leadership that's going to get people to step up and really do their job, and encouraging everybody from the ground up that they work for the taxpayers and that we've got to do everything in our ability to provide quality service. And I'm just not feeling that that's the case right now.
Are you that leader?
I think I've been that leader, and I think I can become that leader again.
Would you, given the fact that you were mayor once and your love for this city, is there this possibility or probability that you would run again?
There is a strong possibility that that's the case. I think that this is the time that if I'm going to do it, I have to do it now.
And what would be different under your leadership versus what we have now?
The difference in what would happen under my leadership would be the fact that I had the ability to attract very talented people to be a part of my team. Number two, I can't accept, and I'm not going to allow departments to function, to be dysfunctional. There is no excuse that we don't have our recycling weekly. And I have to think about every other week. You know, even though we went through COVID, even though we lost employees, the question is, what do we need to do to build that department back up? You know, have we resolved the water bill issue with the meters? You know, I mean, I can go down a whole list. For me, health is extremely important. And I don't have the sense that we are really talking about how to get people to become more healthier. You know, we have renowned hospitals in Baltimore. We have an acting health commissioner, because the health commissioner is now, I think, a deputy mayor. So like, people are switching and changing roles, and you really don't understand. There are people that have not even come back to work in city government since COVID. You know, I'm not gonna point out an agency, but I had a conversation with a young lady who said that they can't go back to their office because somebody else is in the housing and community development on their floor. Everybody should be back to work.
You know, I think it's clear from everyone watching this that there is unfinished business that you have, and it's obvious that you will run again.
I feel if the voters, because that's the voters are the most important, and they have to make choices. If they gave me that choice, I would not let them down. I would do everything in my power to create a structure in city government that people will get responses and know that they're a part of city government. And you can't discriminate. You can't just focus on one population and not another. You have to address everybody, and you have to provide the kind of quality services in everybody's neighborhood. We've got to start attracting people back to the city. You know, that's why the tax base is important. That's why our property tax there's an effort put a referendum on this upcoming election to reduce the property tax. And I think we need to look at that.
And especially how it impacts poor people.
How it impacts poor people, how it impacts the people that are carrying the weight in this city, and that's the taxpayers, you know, who pay high property taxes. There are a whole host of issues. You know, I worked in the economic development field for 17 years doing international business, where we were able to get companies to go overseas and bring companies here. We had the infrastructure, what it takes to be successful, but you've got to have right people at the table, and you've got to have constant conversation. You know, here we have you can't hold something up for 10 years. Right out of my front door, it was the politics of the Uplands community that hadn't gone to the next phase until now. We have to stop allowing the politics of something, either you disliking somebody or something, to stop progress.
Now, I want to dig deeper in some of the things that you just said. And it is obvious that Mrs. Dixon has decided to run for mayor. I think I can say that very confidently. And obviously her experience and her love for this city and is put her on a different course at this point in her life. But I want to dig a little deeper with the candidate. And this is what I want to get into some of the things you said. So, you know, the current mayor has been an ardent supporter of Safe Streets, which is something you know a lot about.
I created Safe Streets.
You created it. We know you've historically have always supported the program, but there have been a lot of issues raised recently about the program's finances and administration. Do you have concerns about the way Safe Streets is being run now?
I do. And the concerns that I have is that the originator of Safe Streets, where you had individuals who were part of that culture, who were out there in the trenches during the times where incidents are going on, trying to feel out from those individuals what the pulse is, and trying to squash that before an incident happens. I don't get that sense anymore that that's what Safe Streets is doing. Hey, I ran into a group of folks at Safe Streets out at the park. They were giving out detergent and other things. That's fine and good, but that shouldn't be their role. Their role should be in those neighborhoods, working with individuals that they know that are part of that culture to figure out a way to help them to get out of it or to try to eliminate some of the incidents that have happened and occurred.
You know, when he was, when the current mayor was city council president, he pushed hard to reform the Board of Estimates. So it's not entirely controlled by the mayor. We haven't seen him take any action on that since he became mayor. Do you think the Board of Estimates needs to be reformed?
I think that the Board of Estimates, and I know well, there are a number of changes that's happened where the mayor doesn't have the kind of power that it used to have, particularly with the council now being able to move money into agencies, as well as you have a city manager. So there are changes where you don't have a mayoral control system. I could live with, if it was a referendum item, with the mayor, city council president, and the controller being the only three on the Board of Estimates.
You know, it's funny, you drive around Baltimore City and you see roads crumbling, potholes everywhere, and it's been that way for years now. Meanwhile, trash pickup is still inconsistent. People have trash piling up in their trash cans for weeks on end in some cases. The state just extended their takeover of the city's Back River waste treatment facility because of the mismanagement there. Why is it, Mrs. Dixon, that DPW can't seem to solve these problems?
You have to have, when you come in as mayor, and you want to bring in your team, you've got to have a good balance of experience. You know, I think Mr. Mitchell probably would have been able to do a great job, considering some of the hiccups that have happened in that department. But you need a good balance. You need people who are going to be there who are experienced. You can't just eliminate everybody from that department who don't have any experience. You also have to understand how these agencies operate and how city government operates. And now, roads are under transportation. And transportation has been an agency almost like DPW, but you don't hear too much about that. we had orange comb. And see, this is the example which is frustrating. I served under a time where we were in a recession. We had very little money and we were able to do thousands of things. We went to single stream recycling. We had orange comb where we were resurfacing roads. We did over, I can't remember what the numbers were, where we used contractors, private contractors, and city contractors. That's a prime example of something that should have been consistent. And you would have probably seen now more roads that have been resurfaced in the city than you've ever seen before, particularly with the city getting money over the last 7, 8 years that we hadn't gotten in the past. And then as it relates to DPW, you have to constantly educate people about how to handle their trash. Now that, we give them trash cans, we give them the recycling containers. Actually, the containers are larger now than they've ever been. You can't just give them a container and not show them how to recycle. You got to be in some cases, in people's faces in some neighborhoods.
Former Mayor Sheila Dixon and now Mayor, candidate for Mayor Sheila Dixon is joining us. It's just phenomenal hearing all your experience and the wisdom and your understanding the intricacies of the city of Baltimore. Don't go away. We'll be back. Being decisive is so important in what you want to do. And obviously, you've thought deep and long about this. You understand the attacks. You know what's at stake. But when it's all said and done, Baltimore desperately, in your opinion, needs leadership.
It does. And it's not just at the city, but in the school system, in every aspect of what makes a city run and function. We need good, talented leadership.
And speaking of your leadership as a former mayor and now as a candidate for mayor again, we want to remind our audience that under your watch, violent crime and specifically homicides were down significantly, continuing a trend that started under Mayor Martin O'Malley. What policing strategies would you bring back from your previous term if you are elected mayor again?
I would bring back, which in some cases is going on now, focus on the violent offenders. I would really be really aggressive again on the gun register that was created by law, where you tracked individuals who got arrested for illegal guns, and you actually went and visited them and followed them and found out what they were doing. I would bring back a more aggressive, allowing people to turn in guns, to get rid of them. I would, something that I know some of the community people want to see happen, and particularly, and that is to allow the citizens to witness guns being burnt, as well as narcotics being burnt, so that you know that we're eliminating it. It's not going anywhere. I would also do preventive measures. You know, the one thing that I will give Mayor Scott credit for is he is looking at a holistic approach, which I looked at as well. And how can you prevent things from happening? What do we need to do with our young people? And where do we need to start early on, you know, in schools and working with our kids and helping them to make other choices? Because our youth crime is getting out of control. And how do we work closely with the Department of Juvenile Justice, Juvenile Services, now that you have a new secretary? And we teamed up, I remember, and I'll never forget this. I had a young man that I would visit, and he was working on his driver's license before they sent him to another state at that time. So we went in and mentored, literally, into the center, our senior staff, and worked with young people.
How would you, if you are elected mayor again, deal with young people being accountable and responsible in some kind of way for the crimes that they commit, no matter what that level of crime is?
Again, we've got to work, when it comes to juvenile crimes, it's the state. And so we've got to work really closely with the state, and we've got to work with our legislators to figure out a better way of coming up with laws that are going to hold our young people accountable. You know, you don't want to, we can't arrest our way out of this. We don't want to lock up everybody, but we have an issue. You know, it's interesting too. One of the things that, I'm going back to health, I met this doctor about 2 weeks ago at the ball game. He came from St. Louis, and he mentioned about lead paint. And he mentioned about how they were able to change the levels of young people as relates to lead. And he was telling me what happened in St. Louis. I would look at what's happening in St. Louis and bring that here to Baltimore to figure out how we can deal with that issue, because our young people are faced with a whole host of challenges that in some ways, it's not necessarily something that they want to do that's causing them to do that. But let's look at the lead levels of our young people. Let's look at some of the other health factors that contribute to people making sometimes the wrong choices.
Do you believe that there's a direct correlation between failing schools and crime?
I think, oh, definitely. It's definitely a correlation between failing schools and crime. And particularly when you pass a child who doesn't know how to read, grade after grade, instead of figuring out early on what is it going to take to help that child and that family to be successful and succeed. You know, I don't even think we focus on the fact, if you have money and you get your child tested, you can figure out what's going on, what kind of learning disabilities or that they might have. Are we doing that for the average child who's having some challenges and struggles in school? Do we really put our emphasis in that? I'm going to give you a brief story. This young lady who has a autistic child, and she was told, oh, your daughter will be able to get a certificate, but she's not going to be able to get a diploma to graduate from high school. She said, the devil is a lie. From the time her child was young up until this year, her daughter graduated with a diploma. But she had the support services with her. She had that person that was with her. She wants to go to Japan this summer. Her mother said, you want to go to Japan? Then learn Japanese. So just think of all the other parents that have autistic children or children with other disabilities that are being passed over because they can't get the resources and services they need. That's why we've got to make changes in our school system.
You know, we've talked a lot about this school-to-prison pipeline in Baltimore City and how the school system is setting the children up for failure. Do you believe, candidate Dixon, that it's time to completely replace the appointed members of the school board? And you mentioned start fresh. And do you support the current And we talked about, and do you support how the current members are appointed, or do you think that needs to change also?
I think that, well, the current members that are appointed by the mayor. And I just believe that you need to make sure you have the right people on the school board and that they know what their role and responsibilities are. They are the board of directors.
What makes them the right people?
Experience in various areas, understanding the structure of how schools run, you know, knowing the business aspect of it, the procurement aspect of it, the academic aspect of it. You need people that have a very thorough knowledge and that they are actually the bosses of the CEO, not the other way around. And when they see things are not happening, then they need to challenge what is not happening in
instead of staying with the status quo.
That's right. I mean, they should not accept it ever. I've never heard anything from the school board.
And that's a problem.
It is a problem.
When you look at the city's checkbook, a lot of money is being poured into nonprofits and charities. In a lot of cases, it's unclear what exactly those organizations do with the city money that they receive. Do you believe the city needs to keep more of that money in-house for things like policing, infrastructure, and so on?
So let's just take the recent funds that were given to the city, the ARPA funds. They have specific criteria based on COVID-related, and I know half of our agencies have something in it that's dealing with COVID. I think half of the money should have been gone to bringing the different agencies up to a certain level where it needs to be, just like the city council passed, moved money over to the fire department. The fire department should have gotten the money in the beginning as relates to fire trucks and ambulances and stuff. I think as far as nonprofits, I think in some cases we have to assess those nonprofits. Who's actually working in the community? And then what happens when that money runs out? How are they going to get funded? And how effective are they? I think we need to do an overhaul of what ones are working well and what ones aren't.
It seems as though that you would support a complete audit of each branch of city government.
Oh, we definitely have to need that. I know the comptroller currently is doing more auditing than is done in the past.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the comptroller. We've seen the Baltimore City Inspector come under attack for conducting an investigation into former State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, an investigation that Mosby herself asked for. Meanwhile, we watched the IG's office uncover millions of dollars worth of waste, fraud, and abuse in the city. Do you believe the Inspector General's office needs more funding to investigate city government?
Oh, I think that the Inspector General's office and the person that is operating it currently is doing a good job, and I think being able to find that those resources are needed. The question then becomes, once she finds what the issue is and where the waste is, the city needs to then come back to say, this is what we're doing to correct that. And that's the piece that a lot of times we don't hear.
You know, candidate Dixon, you also mentioned earlier in our conversation that many employees have not returned to work. And obviously you see that as a glaring problem. We know a significant number of city employees are still teleworking. Do you support teleworking, or is it time to get back to the office?
I think it's time to get back to the office. And if, depending on what the role and responsibility is of that person who's teleworking, because I know in some cases it could be beneficial to an individual, but we need to look at the jobs and what their role is and how they interact with the public. Because the work that I currently do, when I need to reach out to the city government for a company that I'm working with to get some answers about payment or whatever, I expect somebody to get back to me because they're depending on paying their employees and keeping them in working. And to not hear from people 2, 3, 4 days is not acceptable. And so I think in a lot of ways, folks need to come back to work.
Sheila Dixon, candidate for mayor for the city of Baltimore, is joining us in a very candid, unfiltered interview. I'm Armstrong Williams. This is your voice and your future, and the future of the city that you love, and we'll be back. If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. How important is morality, ethics, and integrity in governance?
Oh, it's very important. It's important in whatever profession or business that you do. And I know that, we've had challenges in those areas. But I also know that we could get beyond that, and that knowing that people go through challenges that they go through, that they learn from their mistakes, and that they want to do better in order to not only prove it to themselves, but to prove it to the people that they disappointed, that they can do better.
What does it take from someone like you, as a former mayor, to come full circle to realize that your city, and it's not as if it's a decision that you made, actually the decision was made for you. What does it take, the sacrifice, to come back and put yourself, and just open yourself up for wounds, but also for healing, to come back to say, I want to give this, I want to save this city. I think I have much more to offer. I have more in the tank.
You're going to have to deal with the criticism that people have, because some people are never going to allow you to forget your past, even if they don't even know everything that happened. You also have to deal with, the sacrifices that you make. And first of all, when you run citywide in a campaign, it takes a lot. And then, raising money and going through that process. It also, sacrifices you make from your family, from, things that you like to do that you may have to make choices in. The one thing that I, over the last 8 years, and particularly during COVID, right during the time of COVID, I've always been health conscious, I've always worked out, but I also realized that you have to really be true to yourself. And no matter how someone perceives something, you have to express how you feel about a situation or a person. Not that you're trying to hurt anyone, because people in this day and time are very hurtful. Social media can be very brutalizing to people. And so stepping out, it's about having faith, being grounded in your belief in God, and knowing that you can make a difference.
One of the things that I think that people don't acknowledge with you is that while they see you as in a high queue with a political acumen, you love the city, but you're a business person, and you relate to businesses and what businesses mean to the city like Baltimore. And when you hear about businesses being vandalized, and that deals with the bottom line, but it also hurts the city's tax base. Talk about the importance of empowering and supporting, and how vital entrepreneurs in the business class is to any economy.
Oh, I mean, the business community is what helps, along with people who make a commitment to live here, to help a city to thrive. Not only just for the tax base, but to add those amenities to your community. I work with companies right now, mostly African-American owned companies, and I see the challenges that they face and how they, even despite their challenges, want to do more to help in city by training, because it's in the construction industry. The Eddie supermarket that is going to close in Mount Vernon. My first apartment was on Calvert Street. I used to walk or ride my bike over to that Eddie supermarket, and to hear the owner's voice and having to close that it saddens me that we've come to that point because of a number of issues. So entrepreneurship, businesses in the city, we need to be supportive and help them to thrive. And whatever support the city government can do to assist in that process, we should be rolling up our sleeves, along with helping and assisting residents. It goes hand in hand.
You just mentioned something about African-American business. What do you say? When I see you as Sheila Dixon, a person that has risen out of the ashes of the phoenix. A person that when you were mayor, everybody remembers you because you got something done. You left a legacy. I don't see you in the context of black ethnicity, but you know, some people look at this city and they say, oh, we've got a black mayor, we've got a black city council, we got a black superintendent, we got a black, and look at how this city is failing, and this is a black issue. But it's more than just an issue about the color of somebody's skin. It's about they have a duty and a responsibility. And they don't fail because of their skin. They fail because their election of their duties and responsibilities.
Well, I think in some cases, and I agree, it shouldn't matter what color you are. But I also feel that individuals sometimes get into certain roles and responsibility and they don't really know the magnitude of what it takes. And so one of the things that I try to do when individuals want to run for public office and they come and meet with me, I met with Brandon, with Mayor Scott, I met with Nick Mosby, I met with a number of them, and I shared with them the challenges and what it was going to take and how to feed on those of us who have that kind of expertise and experience. Some people want to listen, some people don't want to listen, you know, but it shouldn't matter. You should serve the people that you represent.
You know, I would like you to look in the camera. I know you've been looking at me, but I want you to look in your camera. And I want you to tell the voters of Baltimore why Sheila Dixon should be elected mayor again, if given the opportunity.
First of all, my commitment to this city and the love that I have and the experience that I have, I know I can make a tremendous difference in the city. And not only today or tomorrow, but in generations to come. And so I've given this a tremendous amount of thought. I love my private life, but I also know what it takes to really move things forward in a positive way that we can make the kind of impact for our schools, for city services, for businesses in this city. And if the voters choose and understand who I am as a person, then they will see the difference and the impact that I can make.
You have no doubt, if you're elected mayor again, the educational system has to change. Crime must change. And young people, no matter who they are, it has to change, that their future, because of your experience, because you've done this before, and you feel it's not rocket science.
It's not that it's not rocket science, but again, I go back to, and maybe this is a woman's thing, no. You've got to be able to juggle multiple things at one time, and you can't make excuses. You have to be transparent. When something's not working, you have to say, okay, this is not working. I'm going to try it this way. And people are more sensitive and they are more understanding when you do that. And you can't just, you have to think things through. You know, it's like this truancy issue right now and the curfew. I don't think they thought that through very well. Were you going to ask city workers to go out versus looking at how we can utilize maybe some of the other police forces to help, not in locking them up, but to remind them that there's a curfew and that you need to go in?
How do we really help people on the bottom rung of the ladder? It seems as though no matter who's in office, the poor becomes poor, and those that have much more.
But you have to also, that person who's poor, you have to show them the resources and support that's out there. And it starts with education. It starts with giving them that opportunity and helping them to grow. I mean, I know people that started on the back of a trash truck who now is a supervisor, just using an example, in DPW. So you have, but you have to show them that it's not about taking care of you, but showing them how to take care of themselves and their family and giving them the tools to help support them. Now, that's not necessarily a liberal mind thought, scent, but you have to show them that they can.
Remind our local listeners here in Baltimore and our national listeners what is so special and unique about Baltimore, beyond hearing about it's ranked number 150 at the bottom in education, the crime, the drugs, the headlines that it makes. What is it about Baltimore that still gives you hope? That's why you've never left.
The people, the institutions that we have here, the museums that we have here, the communities and neighborhoods and the camaraderie that people have within those communities. We have beautiful, unique neighborhoods and communities. People who are here in Baltimore, not just Baltimoreans, but people who come from other places to live here. You know, we have great universities and colleges and hospitals, renowned hospitals, where, you know, I strongly believe we could be the healthiest city in America as a result of that. So we have a lot of great amenities. We have great parks. You know, people finally discovered Drew Hill Park during COVID, Patterson Park. We just have so many. Of course, the food. We have great food, great restaurants here in the city.
And professional teams.
Professional teams. We have a great Orioles, and we're going to have a great Raven team. You know, so there are a whole host of things that we have. We're not far from, 2 hours away to go down to Ocean City to the beach or Sandy Point, or our location, the Washington, D.C. We don't get a lot of bad weather. We haven't had a snowstorm in a couple years.
You know, you're really at peace now.
Oh, I've been at peace because, believe me, it took a lot to get me here. When I left public office, and you want to talk about personal, when I left public office, I not only felt ashamed and embarrassed, I was going through menopause, I got mental health. I did a lot to really help me to ground myself. And it took a lot, and I don't mind, and I'm not embarrassed to share any of that.
But you're ready now. You're ready to be mayor again. We wish you well.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tough. I really appreciate your sitting down with us on Your Voice, Your Future. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sure candidate Dixon will tell you more about how you can support and join her campaign for mayor. This is just an initial step. There'll be much more coming from her in the very near future. I'm Armstrong Williams, and this is Your Voice, Your Future.